morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. It is March 26th, and this is Committee of the Whole. We have Director Demare, Area A, online, and Director Crompton online from Whistler, and the rest of us here in the boardroom. Good morning. And good morning, Jane. Good morning. Okay, we are grateful and humbled by the stewardship of the Lillooet people on whose land we are here today. Please take a minute to embrace the beauty of this land. Mount Currie is all time today, and it is beautiful here. So thank you. I will call this meeting to order. Could I ask that someone please make a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Director Pettengill, seconded by Director Hopful. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And I think we're skipping regional moment, right?
We don't have one today.
Okay, and we'll skip closed for now. There is no closed. Okay, first delegation today is Peter Schultz, registered professional planner and professional transportation planner from Kieranstone Planning on behalf of Northern Development Initiative Trust.
He's joining remotely.
Oh, okay. Good morning, Mr. Schultz. Can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. We are ready for your presentation. You have 5 minutes for your presentation and roughly 5 minutes for questions. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. This project is entitled Prince George North Vancouver Railway Transitioning from Class 1 Management. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is a map of the current railways in Western North America. Red indicates it is active, white indicated is not active or been discontinued. It tells a story of the bifurcation in the railway industry over the last 20 years due to the processes of deindustrialization. They started mainly, the bifurcation was most noticeable in Saskatchewan, where approximately 30 to 40% of the rail network was shut down by the Class 1 railways, being CN and CP, mainly in the 1980s and 90s. And in their stead, about half of those lines that were deactivated were then uptaken by short line companies that focused on this particular spur line, providing services to small and medium enterprises in a local area, and then transporting those goods to rail hubs where they can be converted into large train sets for long-range distribution by the Class 1 railways. There's approximately a dozen short line railways operating in Saskatchewan. There's less in Alberta, although the process was similar, because in Saskatchewan, typically the provincial government would not allow the railways to be removed or the tracks to be removed, whereas in Alberta they usually did. BC is not immune to this process, and but we just have less track density due to our difficult topography. Although we have seen the Kettle Valley Railway shut down, converted into a bikeway, and then deactivated as a bikeway. So the Class 1 lines are running from Prince Rupert to Valemount and from Vancouver to Valemount. CN Rail is exclusively using those lines, and they have offered to shut down, or they have indicated their desire to shut down 100 Mile House to Brackendale, which would include the section through the entirety of this SLRD section, except for south of Squamish. And we're just basically trying to repeat successful models farther east. And we have a short line operator that is willing to take on that track portion and is seeking to work with the BC government and CN to foment that transition. They are confident that there is latent demand from small and medium enterprises to keep the railway open. And indeed, we have a memo from an investor who wishes to set up an inland port at Exeter at 100 Mile House to serve the Port of Squamish. And that's where that is now. We've also undertaken a proof of concept for a bikeway from Lillooet to North Vancouver, which would reinforce any future passenger services. Next slide, please. The route is also important for redundancy purposes in case there's a collapse in the canyon, most likely in this location. So trains could get around to Vancouver through an alternative route. Next slide, please. The project is now 3 months old. It's about 70% complete. This is one of the last delegations due to it took several months to organize a delegation to SLRD. We have politically de-risking investment means we've spoken to a number of municipalities and First Nations and the provincial government and CN to sort of standardize the level of understanding of the project and what it can achieve. And these other steps, I don't have time to go through them individually, but they are most of them are in fairly advanced stage at this point. We're primarily looking at this juncture for SLRD to sign the resolution, which was originally distributed by the District of Squamish, on the need to not shut down the railway and pursue alternatives. If you're interested, provide some insights or advice on the bikeway component of the project. Next slide, please. July 2026 is the key date, at which point a number of options are possible that are mainly under the decision of CN, which is the leaseholder of the right-of-way and the track. They can do nothing, or they could ask BC Rail Properties to transfer the fixed assets to CN for scrap, or they could seek a sublease with a short line, or they could seek to surrender their lease and transfer it to another party. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I've pretty much already gone over this, so I'll stop the presentation here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you.
Good morning, Peter. It's nice to see you. Vivian Birch-Jones here, Area B. Did I hear you say you have a short line operator that's expressed some interest and you have an investor and there's some conversations going on directly with the government? Did I hear that right?
Very close. There is a short line operator that is a franchise based in the United States. They have indicated initial interest and penciled out the terms that they're looking for to take over operations. They believe operational profitability, my goodness, profitability is a near certainty, so they're comfortable to take on the goal. Their concerns are ensuring that the track, mainly on the big Lillooet Hill there, has been appropriately maintained and they're not stuck with any major multi-million-dollar bills to upgrade it, and that they are not in a financial position to undertake passenger services, which may require subsidization. However, they are fully willing to work with a common dispatch arrangement to allow for a separate passenger service, or to consider adding on passenger cars onto any regular scheduled freight services.
That's excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate the work that's going on. You said that Squamish had already signed on to a resolution. I really like it that you're calling us SLRD. That's not something that took me a while to realize that was SLRD.
No, I apologize. I actually lived in Pemberton for a couple of years and I thought that was the local lingo.
Just picking it up now. I'm going to use it. But there's a resolution that the SLRD has not signed on to, but Squamish has. Did I hear that correctly?
If SLRD has signed on to it, I don't have a copy of the sign.
Thank you.
You guys have them.
To be clear, it is a resolution that we're proposing to bring forward to UBCM, so it has been approved at the district, the Squamish district table, but it'll be forwarded to Lower Mainland Local Government Association and on to UBCM.
Okay.
That's the resolution.
Okay. Not to Silga.
No, sorry, it was jointly forwarded, and Mayor can speak to this, but it was jointly forwarded, I think, between us and another community. It'll be put to vote.
Yeah, I believe 100 Mile House is advancing it.
Beautiful.
At Silga is my understanding. The challenge with that process, as we all know, is one, it's just broadly a challenging process, but there's a timing issue here where those, I don't know Silga's date, but LMLG's in May, yeah, same time. So in May, timeframe. And of course, if successful, it'll go to UBCM, which takes it into September, and there's some time pressures here with
Right.
this. So anyways, it's the mechanism we have and it's imperfect, but that's that work.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you, Peter. Peter, did you mention that a bike lane from Squamish to West Vancouver will solidify passenger rail service? Or did I mishear you?
I've undertaken a proof of concept for a bikeway which would go from Lonsdale Quay to Lillooet and traverse the entirety of SLRD from north to south. There's a few pinch points like Nairn Falls or Watts Point, but they're fairly small. The main issue is Porto Cove to Brunswick Beach, but a high route it can probably be proven out, and I'm in discussions to look more closely at that pinch point below the it's just south of Porto Cove, where there should be a high route through, and if that is possible, then I believe we can set up a potential for world-class bikeway all the way through, which I think would attract considerable international attention. Can I ask whether this meeting is in camera or whether there's a
No,
journalist
this
present?
is, no, this is public.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Rainbow, Director Crompton, Director Herford for questions.
Yeah, the operator that you're talking about, are you focusing just Squamish North, or would it include the possibility of passenger transit between Squamish and North Vancouver?
The project as a whole is looking at North Vancouver to Prince George with a focus on the section to be closed down, which is Exeter to Brackendale. I am coordinated with Mountain Valley Institute, Lee Haber, who I believe is presenting at this meeting today or will be presenting at this meeting today. His focus is on the passenger service. The short line we are dealing with is happy to coordinate schedules with any kind of passenger service. It's as long as you've got bypass track, you can actually get a lot of trains on a single track. And we're encouraging, we're working as constructively as possible with CN on the topic.
Okay, you.
So there's ongoing conversations between the shoreline operator and CN then?
There were.
Thank you.
Armand?
I can't answer that question fully unless it's an in-camera session.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for your presentation, and we do look forward to further work. Is there anything final that you would like to add or leave us to think about?
I would ask the board to think about your level of interest in this bikeway concept, as the vast majority of it would be within SLRD. And if there is interest, then we can arrange just another session and I can focus on that subsection. There will be an appendix in the final report that will include the bikeway concept, but it's usually easier to discuss things verbally.
Okay, thank you. I have one final question.
Who would own the land the bikeway's on? Would it all be within the railroad right away? And then who are you proposing pay for the bikeway?
It is a geographic proof of concept at this time. So I was looking at topography. I was basically asking the question, can you do this without it being an astronomically expensive project? It would cross, there are some routes where access to the rail right away would be helpful, but not necessary. There's a couple locations where access to the railway is necessary. There's some rural acreages that may have to be transect, mainly on the steep slopes of Howe Sound, and most of it would be crown land. And there's a few sections on Anderson Lake which would have to probably be a floating path off. You'd have the railway and then some rocks and then basically using floating docks to get the track around a couple of really steep areas. Who would pay for it? I haven't looked into that. but
Have you-
I believe the cost benefit ratio is likely to be extremely positive.
Have you talked to the St'át'imc and the Squamish Nations about the opportunity?
Briefly, the focus of this project is on the railway. Most of the folks in the Lillooet would be indicate they would love to see their town, their tourism industry in their town reinvigorated. Uh, and we're presenting to Squamish Nation in a couple of weeks. And we're in communication, but again, I mean, the main deadline we're working on is the rail transfer project because of this looming July 2026 date.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we will leave it here and we'll be in touch, Mr. Schultz. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, our next delegation is Lee Haber, Director of Strategy and Partnerships for Mountain Valley Institute. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes for presentation and a few minutes for questions.
Okay. Good morning, Chair and Directors. My name is Lee Haber. I'm a railway engineer and planner representing Mountain Valley Institute. We are a Vancouver-based nonprofit focused on sustainable mobility infrastructure in the province. We're here to ask for the SLRD support for our proposed Sea to Sky near-term passenger rail study. Next slide, please. MVI is an active participant in the Sea to Sky Rail Roundtable organized by the offices of MLA Jeremy Valeriot and MP Patrick Weiler. There is a rare alignment emerging in this corridor. Local governments, First Nations, and elected representatives at both levels of senior government are paying attention. What's needed now is the evidence base to translate that attention into action. That's exactly what this study provides. It answers 4 key questions that no one has answered rigorously yet for this corridor. Is passenger rail in the near term feasible? What should it look like? What is it going to cost? And what are the specific benefits for municipalities in the Sea to Sky region? This board has already recognized the importance of quality regional transit and is actively planning for a future with better interregional connectivity, and has called on higher levels of government to seriously investigate the restoration of passenger rail. This study is the logical next step. Next slide, please. The Sea to Sky corridor is one of the 5 regional rail axes in MVI's broader South Coast vision. While we see the long-term future being part of an extensive electrified network, this study is deliberately focused on what's achievable in the near term using existing rail infrastructure. Next slide, please. The study area runs from Lonsdale in North Vancouver to Lillooet, passing through every electoral area and municipality within the SLRD. Highway 99 is the region's lifeline, and its vulnerability is well understood here. Seasonal closures, wildfires, and landslides have repeatedly disrupted connectivity for communities throughout the district. CN Rail's recent announcement of its intention to terminate its lease of the Squamish subdivision makes the timing of this study urgent. The window to assess and potentially secure this corridor's passenger rail future is open now. Next slide, please. Passenger rail has a deep history in the region. The BC Rail Caribou Prospector connected these communities to each other and to Metro Vancouver for decades. The question this study answers is what would it look like to responsibly restore that connection using modern technology, the clear-eyed assessment of costs, benefits, and ridership. Next slide, please. We believe diesel multiple units are the right technology for a near-term solution. Proven in mountainous terrain, compatible with existing non-electrified track, and available now. They offer a realistic lower cost path forward without waiting for massive infrastructure investments. Next slide, please. This study will deliver travel time estimates by segment, capital and operating cost estimates, ridership forecasting, subsidy requirements, and a full multiple count evaluation covering economic, environmental, and social impacts. We're also pleased to share that RSI Alliance, or European Rail Engineering Consortium, has agreed to provide technical support for this study. Next slide, please. or that's the SLRD represents the full majority of this corridor. Your endorsement and your contribution would signal to the province, to Ottawa, and to the public that the communities of this region are united behind this work. Our ask to the board is $90,000 to fund the study. This amount is needed to properly execute a full study with rigorous ridership modeling, detailed cost estimates, and a multiple account evaluation that will stand up to scrutiny at any level of government. This adjusted amount reflects a revised quote from our data supplier, who has also agreed to us sharing this data with the regional district if the district chooses to fully fund this study. We have also been in contact with SLRD staff about how our work can help the regional district's own work. Thank you for your time, and we hope you'll choose to be a part of this.
All right. That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I think I heard that it was a revised request. Originally, it was presented in the report was $20,000 ask. So can you speak about the difference between what you're asking for today versus what was previously provided?
Yeah, absolutely. So the $20,000 that was included in previous ask, that's basically the amount we need to absolutely get started on this. That would not include the ridership data that is really essential to provide an accurate picture of ridership. So the bulk of that $90,000 ask is basically for the data. And I mean,
If I may, who holds that data? Like, where is it coming from? Why does it cost $70,000?
so that is being provided by Streetlight Data. Streetlight Data has worked in the past. For instance, there was a previous study in 2022 that looked at transportation patterns for the Sea to Sky region, and they also use Streetlight Data.
Director Herford, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious if we have. I'm just thinking about potential duplication here, and just if our work around regional transit has some of the data that can form into this, like, is there a way that we can move some of this forward with things that we have, or is this a completely different piece? So I don't know if I'm not sure if that's a staff question or if the direction is to like investigate that a little bit. Could someone speak to how these things could fit together or have so far?
I can. A lot of the data is proprietary and we've signed non-disclosure on a lot of the data that we've received. However, when this group has reached out to staff has told them that the province, they can reach out to the province of BC Transit to see if they're readily available. But we can't share a report that wasn't ours and isn't currently available in the public domain. But we gave them contact information of the people who can.
So we're in possession of data that's similar to the goals of this for our purposes. I'm just trying to understand if this is something new to us, or if there's a benefit to us to have this information, or.
Yeah.
Do you want to just wrap up some questions? First?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be for
Another.
next.
Maybe at 9.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I have Director Rich Jones and then Director Richmond and then Director Pengill.
No, I did, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
So 90,000 would fund the entire set, is that what I'm understanding? And you brought that complete ask to the regional district. Are there considerations for any other funding sources?
I mean, yeah, like we're looking at other potential funding from, let's say, TransLink, the province. We've inquired, early stage inquiries. The early indication is that it would be unlikely we would get funding from them. They didn't completely preclude the possibility. We should have a better idea in the next few weeks what exactly that is. That's the picture so far. It might also be possible we would get some funding from industry suppliers.
Have you had any indication of funding from the province?
We have contacted the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. The early indication that it would be unlikely we would get funding, but they also did not rule it out, and they would explore to see what would be possible.
This is well within their wheelhouse. They have far deeper pockets than our little regional district. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was you and I spoke a while ago. My recollection, so two things was that, Yeah, I guess I'm wondering how much specificity we're looking for in numbers that, there was a sense that you need a population of, I don't know, it's like 100,000 or something along the route, or 200,000 to make this viable. Like, are we taking that number from, to know it's 200,000-ish to like 165.7 is the number, or like what's the gap between what we know and what we think we need to know in terms of specificity of population from the.
That's a great question. So I think the big challenge with the Sea to Sky region is it's very unique in that population wise, it's got about 50,000 people, but it's got a disproportionate economic influence. For instance, what's interesting, given the previous study in 2022, there's a huge amount of visitor traffic in the Sea to Sky region. And I mean, that's difficult to capture using conventional census methods, which just look at commuter data. We have done some back of envelope calculations for okay, would the current population and travel patterns justify it? The early sense is that it seems viable for something that would, let's say, have 10 trains per day operating for most of the length. But we need the data, we need to do the proper analysis to really, fully nail down whether it is one.
Okay, and then the other piece I recall from our conversation that the sort of the model for this sort of thing, at least at the time, was that individuals with large amounts of property along the route would see this as a huge development opportunity, would incentivize that, and they would be primary funders and subsidizers of it through the development potential, and therefore, Squamish Nation would be a primary have interest in theory. Have any of these sorts of folks been approached to fund this, and can you speak to their level of interest of investing in this?
So I mean, we are aware of that. We haven't yet had any meetings with, let's say, any prominent property developers in the region, but that is definitely something that we're looking at as another potential, funding source for the study.
The trains that you had in your slides, you said they're diesel and that they're available now.
Yep.
And that they're compatible with the track that exists. Are they nimble to deal with the very tight turns in some sections without requiring a realignment of the track? Because that's one of the things we've heard as a barrier to making it faster. I mean, is that kind of your vision?
Yeah, so I mean, you're on the right track. Great question. That's one of the reasons why we are focusing on diesel multiple units, is that they have far better acceleration and deceleration than if it was a locomotive pulling cars, which is what basically a lot of systems, that's what the West Coast Express uses, that's what GO Transit in Ontario use it. And the idea is that, I mean, our early analysis indicates that there would have to be some other upgrades so that we could really maximize speed along the corridor. One of them would be improving the signaling. So the idea is that trains, there would be the signaling would basically protect the trains from going too fast on a curve. So the idea is that they could then go as fast as possible. And that would minimize the need for having to do realignments and infrastructure upgrades. We already have done some analysis of what it looks like if it was electrified. We know that in an electrified system, it would take about an hour and a half from Whistler to downtown Vancouver. That is possible. It's not going to be as fast for diesel multiple units, but we're hoping that the travel times will be quite a bit faster than what the Caribou Prospector originally had back in the day.
Okay, thank you. And then there would be significant requirement for the offloading in each community that would change. I think that would come out in your study, is that once you get into Whistler, you're in Creekside. So now you're adding a whole bunch of traffic to an area that's really not transit compatible. Being the only station is in behind Meadow Lake Lodge, and it's not conducive to, a large offload. So I think there's lots to think about here, and just considering the other communities along the track, there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
I guess that's what your study is going to show, is sort of the costs of what it would
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we want to look at what the trade-offs are along the corridor, and I think, I mean, we want to have further conversations with communities along the corridor to identify like what are those ideal, let's say, station locations, because yes, in many of them, like Whistler, there may be challenges with the last mile.
Yeah, once you're in Whistler with all your gear.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just process wise, like if we wanted to do a study and find stuff out, I think we'd have to put out an RFP and so on, especially at this magnitude. Is this something that could be sole sourced or?
No, I think we would have to take that offline and discuss that with staff. Yeah, but thanks for bringing that up. Go ahead.
Just, and on this, your organization is a not-for-profit entity.
Correct.
That's correct, working on rail advocacy, which I think we'll just play in just to make sure that we're understanding who's speaking to us as carefully.
That raises for me, I guess this is primarily a study that we use as an advocacy document. Is that fair? Like this is someone else's line, it's owned by the province, it's through Squamish-Lillooet territory. And the research would be into someone else's assets without their agreement to participate. The province has not stated that they would participate, correct? So primarily this would be used to convince them to come to the table, because I imagine if they are going to initiate something like this, the province or lease it to someone else, they're going to do a study that's going to be broader in scope and probably cost a lot more than this one. Is that fair?
I think, I mean, the focus of our organization is to advance the conversation when it comes to sustainable transportation across the province. And I think what this study aims to provide is to advance the conversation on passenger rail for the region. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there will be conclusions that are worth advocating for. But I want to be clear, like, this is not like cheerleading rail. Like, I mean, it's going to be very clear, like, there are real costs going to be associated with this, right? It's not, you know, there's real technical challenges to this. What we aim to show is like what is possible, what it's going to take, and what are the potential means for achieving that. And then it's up for leaders in the region, the province, possibly federally, to decide what the best mechanism is for moving forward.
I guess I just encourage you to continue to make efforts to speak to the province who owns the rail corridor and to the Squamish-Lillooet.
Absolutely.
And several other. Obviously. Does anyone else?
So what do we want to do then? Do we just want to sit on the sidelines and do nothing, or do we want to get involved in some way in helping advance this? I mean, the answers I get when I ask about passenger rail right now is, oh, it's not going to happen. The track's not good enough, and no, it's just a pipe dream. Or is it? I'm listening here. It sounds as though there are some possibilities that we as a little group of amateurs around here haven't considered. If we had passenger rail in place, you think of the positive impacts on the sea to sky. You know, think of the problems we're having with the road right now, which are only going to be exacerbated in the future. And I think we should be involved to some extent in helping advance this study and helping move towards a passenger rail service.
We'll have an opportunity to discuss that later on in the agenda.
Okay.
With correspondence for action later on.
Okay,
I
thank
do
you.
see Director Demerick, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious if your organization has done consultation with First Nations in the past. We still have, if this is planned to go to Lillooet, we have the Statliam Nation also.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, we have met with the Squamish First Nation and the Lillooet First Nation, and I've had conversations with the Shekelquash First Nation as well. We didn't present specifically this near-term passenger railway study proposal. That is something we would like to do. But we have talked to them about regional rail, what it would mean for their communities.
Okay, thank you.
As you saw in the previous delegation, there are other groups working on this. There's a group of elected officials from the north and Prince George leading a large, I guess, consortium. And so are you working with them?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working closely with Peter. I think very much like what we're working on aligns. The having freight rail there with passenger rail, they basically enhance the viability of both because then we're defraying the maintenance cost of the railway. So I think, yeah, it's very much positive for everybody that these efforts are happening. I think very much their efforts, it's more in the northern part of the corridor, which is focused more on freight. Ours is more on the southern part that's focused on passenger. And I think it goes to show that there's plenty of potential for rail in this region.
Just order of magnitude, like, is it fair to say, the question isn't necessarily just, do we want passenger rail? It's a question for us, do we want passenger rail in a population of 150,000 people? Order of magnitude-ish, is that a fair thing, or is there a vision that it's quite feasible to have passenger rail in our current-ish population?
I mean, that's something our study aims to figure out, whether it is, let's say, viable today. My sense is that, I mean, this is very early stages. I think it would be feasible to operate a passenger rail service, might require probably a small annual subsidy to operate it, but probably something I think, given what the other funding mechanisms that the regional district's looking, I think my early sense is that it would be within the means. But then again, we do have to go look at the exact numbers to get a definitive answer on that.
Where's Jeremy?
He's on the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we were waiting for him to come in. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the next presentation, or go and whatever you prefer. I see. Yeah. Did we do? I didn't do that for the last one.
No, we don't have to
Okay,
receive
no.
allegations.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll be in touch after our meeting and some deliberation.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time.
Right. We just turn off the YouTube feed so we don't get echoes.
Excellent. Okay, our next delegation is MLA Jeremy Valeriot, West Vancouver Sea to Sky. Good morning, and we also have Jatinder Sidhu here today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Ford, and thanks, Chair and Directors, for putting me on your agenda. I've been listening with interest to the last two delegations. Sorry I'm not there in person. Last time we spoke in September, I was up in Kitimat. I'm just in the Squamish office today, but I will I'll make sure that I'm there in person for the next one of these check-ins. It's really valuable for me to check in with you roughly every 6 months. I'm just going to give you a really quick snapshot of what I'm up to and then leave the rest of the time for questions and discussion. I'll get to rail at the very end because it's obviously a topic of the day, but just really briefly headed back to Victoria, back in session on Monday. April and May will be the busiest months, typically when the government puts forward most of its legislative agenda. We've had a few things so far, including a pretty tough budget that you'll be aware of, and that probably doesn't leave a lot of room for rail investigations, but that's something that I'm pursuing. So a lot of a huge deficit. No dramatic cuts to services, but some PST increases and other things that will hit people in the pocketbook. Couple other things, we've supported a $400 million strategic investment fund, some legislation for safe schools and places of worship, civil forfeiture. I've voted against the budget because we don't think that it lays out a vision for BC. there's some changes to freedom of information rules that we haven't been in favor of, and then we're expecting amendments to the Declaration Act on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which has generated obviously a lot of discussion that you'll be aware of. I would, if we have time, I would be interested to hear, given your close relationships with the St'át'imc nations, both south and north, what your thoughts are on that. I know Mayor of Whistler or Director Crompton gave his mayor's address, got a loud round of applause to carrying on with reconciliation the way we have been, rather than getting diverted by some of the private property pieces that have come out. But so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Regional transit ongoing, SLRD staff and your board are continuing that discussion. As you know, we didn't renew our agreement with the Green Caucus, didn't renew our agreement with the NDP. However, there are still opportunities to get this over the line, but it may very well need a strong push from everybody involved. And so I think we know that everybody's ready to do that, but a couple more things to fall into place before we hopefully don't need to do that. But otherwise, just discussion on the early discussions on a new hospital for Squamish in cooperation with the Regional Hospital District and others. And I'll just quickly touch on rail. Really interesting to hear both Peter and Lee talk about rail. I do agree that it's firmly within the provincial mandate, especially given the history of BC Rail. And so Lauren Dirkson's the MLA for Caribou Chilcotin. He's been pretty active on this, particularly with this proponent that thinks they can make it happen, and he's arranging a meeting with Minister Farnworth to discuss this. So we'll both be advocating all up and down, as you mentioned. Northern mayors up to Prince George are working on this, and MLAs across party lines as well. So we'll be urging the province to put some money forward to help with this study. But as Lee has noted, the budget's tight and they're not making any promises right now, but there hopefully will be an opportunity. I think that's all I've got. Really interested to hear from you what there are topics top of mind, particularly reconciliation and anything on regional transit. So leave it there if that's okay, Chair Ford.
Certainly, thank you. Who would like to start? Questions? Mike? No? Okay, well, Jeremy, you and I have met a number of times regarding regional transit. It is something that we've put our full weight behind and we continue to advocate about. And I think that's well understood within the corridor. There have been more articles in the Chief and the Peak and every other publication that we can think of. So keep going, keep pushing. Don't lose track of Minister Farnworth if you can. And we continue to do the same. As far as other items that are top of mind, it's busy. It's a busy place here in the SLRD, and we continue to move forward with development opportunities in our master plan communities, such as Bray Creek is here today for a new idea presenting to the board. My goodness, there's so many things. So we are not slowing down. Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Well, yeah, we just had a question about our thoughts on DRIPA and where the government's going. I'm not clear exactly where they want to go. It seems to me, reading our recent guide and the work we're doing throughout the corridor, that I think it would be a shame if we lost momentum on a lot of important work that's being done. I think that's fair.
Absolutely, yeah. Director Hoppel?
I just want to thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, like, where are you in talking to the province about the rail line? And is the province looking at maybe even putting a pause on the July date?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Director. I guess one thing I left out of the kind of initial thoughts is it's great. I'm really encouraged to see the progress that Peter and Lee have presented, and it does seem quite promising with a potential private operator. However, I am quite sensitive to the fact that we are trying to get regional bus transit across the line. So I've to some degree had informal discussions with Mr. Farnworth is it's we need to figure out what our main ask is. So there's a certain amount of ordering the rail piece. However, I know that the ministers met with CN, and so I think that July deadline is firmly in sight. And I think our biggest objective is to avoid the worst case scenario, which is that the potential loss of the line entirely. If and so I think that's been our ask of the provincial government so far, is to not allow that to happen. And I don't have an answer on that yet, but at least it's got attention of both the premier and the minister in terms of possibilities. So there's more to come on that, but the July date is pretty critical to avoid losing this forever, which is really, as I said, worst case scenario.
Thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair, thanks very much for being here and for the presentation. I'm gonna touch on the healthcare component. And thanks for hosting the meeting a few months ago. To bring some parts of the various partners together around an initial discussion for the Squamish Hospital. Since then, the budget has come out. We've also seen basically a repacing of everything in the healthcare budget. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit similar to your comments that you just made around being really clear around our advocacy asks and the prioritization. I just want to be clear that one of the things that we have talked about is really refocusing the importance of the master planning process that we continue to push with BCH to really clarify what the priorities are across the corridor for healthcare and how that has shifted since the budget. So now that we're seeing the long-term care facility being repaced, and so there's just varying pieces there. So I just want to be cognizant and flag with you folks that refocus on getting that master plan work really across the line and continuing to work with BCH and the ministry on how we prioritize the variety of healthcare asks across the sea to sky. So just wanted to flag that and some feedback since both that meeting as well as the budget that's come out.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Noted that we can't go at these piecemeal. I think in the case of the hospital, especially given the budgetary adjustments on Hilltop House, the hospital is, as we've always said, a 10-year project, and we should talk about how to keep it moving. But I agree, not at the detriment of other health spending, and especially with it. So yeah, point well taken. And thanks for kind of, because I know there are other pieces of that master plan that are just as important, and it can't be a zero-sum equation. So
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, was there anything else that you wanted to bring to our attention as far as any of the provincial mandates that affect our corridor?
I think I've covered the main ones. I mean, highway safety, highway congestion, but as you bring on some of these new developments that you're talking about, is gonna be even more key. I met with the Solicitor General, Minister of Public Safety, about highway safety, and they are going to get back to us on a couple of initiatives that they're working on in terms of reframing how they do enforcement for speed. And as you know, there's a reckless driving private members bill, or maybe don't know, but coming up, which I've supported so far, just partly on the basis of some of the driving I've seen on the Sea to Sky Highway, and I know happens in other parts of the province. That one's sort of a response to a tragedy on the island. So I think, I mean, the highway does take up a lot of our bandwidth as it probably does yours, or maybe less so given the responsibilities. But I think that one's at a point where we know that regional bus transit won't solve highway issues, but it's one of many pieces of the puzzle that need to go into that. And so I think that's the other main issue that we spend a lot of time on. And yeah.
Yeah, regional transit, it won't solve all of it, but it will definitely solve a lot for many, many people. And letters from your surroundings, people in your sphere of influence, to continue to support our joint advocacy for regional transit. We've talked to the school district regarding their advocacy for regional transit. So we want to continue to show that this region is enthusiastic about getting buses on the road. And the other thing that I'd be remiss to Russell's not here today, but I know that he would mention paving of the highway. And I know that spring is coming, and with it comes all of the potholes. The next time you come up to Pemberton, you'll notice that the atmospheric river we've just experienced has taken the entire bus or the bike shoulder near Gord's Garden has fallen into the ditch. And it is a mess. In the dark, that will be a disaster. So I would strongly advocate to you to please get the pavers out as soon as possible so that the potholes and the cracks in the highway can be dealt with, because it is bad. It is really, really bad. I have Tony and then I have Mike.
Yeah, just a comment about safety on the highway. I don't know if you have ever driven the M25 ring road around London. That used to be a racetrack. People driving at ridiculous speeds. It doesn't happen anymore because they put cameras in place, and they're very obvious. There are signs that tell you they're in place. The speed limit is clearly posted, and if you're caught speeding, you get a ticket like that, and it has slowed people down. Why on earth can't we look at something like that in BC? I know years ago we had those roving vans with and you never knew where there was going to be a speed trap, and there were questions about our rights as individuals, whether they're being infringed on and so on. But if cameras were put up and they were very obvious, and if the signs were there, and it really would solve the driving problem on the Sea to Sky overnight. So is that something that the province is prepared to consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Tony. We sat down with the road safety staff and talked about this, and the answer, I think, goes back to 2001, Gordon Campbell getting elected, partly on the promise of doing away with those vans with radar and photos. There are now, they have sort of slowly come back into the system. There's something like 100 odd red light cameras, and 40 of them have speed. However, when they asked me about intersections, I said it's like, I don't really, and I could be wrong, I'm open to your opinions. I don't feel like the intersections on the Sea to Sky are the issue. It's the straightaways and the central parts of the highway. So, but at least that precedent is there, and it's something that we've been advocating for. Obviously, Lions Bay would love to have speed over distance, and maybe other parts too. I think given the number of road tragedies, it is something that needs to be brought up, but it takes a fair bit of political courage given the history of it. And so they're open to some advocacy, working together on some advocacy for that. But the Solicitor General said they would get back to us with some ideas about what other. I think they're basically rethinking the idea of enforcement being done by officers who really have a hard time pulling anybody over. Only not many safe places to do enforcement on our highway. So I think they probably are open to it, but it will take some effort to get them over that political hurdle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I was gonna reach out to you, Director Mack and I personally, but I'll piggyback on the chair's comments about the highway. We have a few issues around the valley here where we have MOTT infrastructure, namely their culverts that aren't being properly maintained, and it's causing localized flooding. It's happening up the meadows quite significantly, and we've been pushing for, I'm gonna say, a couple of years to get some work done on those culverts. And out towards Mount Curry, and on top of the culverts, there's some ditches as well that we're not allowed to deal with that are causing localized flooding. And as an example, those culverts in the Mount Curry area, it's not flooding the road. So the pat answer we're getting from the ministry is our infrastructure is not in jeopardy. In other words, the fact that the culverts are plugged is not jeopardizing the road, therefore they don't see the need to fix it. However, their infrastructure is not allowing proper drainage, and people's septic fields and yards and roads are flooding, and the septic fields is the biggest one for me personally, for obvious reasons. So we keep getting that response back that their infrastructure is fine, we don't need to do anything about it. And it's fairly simple work on their part. Some of the ditch work we could probably maintain in our own communities as well if we were given the green light, but we are getting zero audience on this.
Yeah.
And so we were gonna come to you, and if you can help support that conversation, it's really not that big a work. I know it's sort of within the relationship between the contractor and the ministry, but we could definitely use a little push from your side to help get attention on those culverts and ditches.
Okay. I've got budget estimates, so I get an hour with, or maybe an hour, maybe more with the Minister of Transportation. And I mean, we already had in mind the highway north of Whistler for paving and snow clearing and others, so we can add that into the mix. I mean, sometimes they actually have a program. This one sounds like it needs more of a push, just given their position on it so far. But I may be able to find out about paving on the spot and get back to you. But let me bring up this other issue because it, like you say, yeah, they're looking at it in a very siloed way, and it's not really that helpful. But
It's not, I don't think there's a big budget attached to it. This is something I believe that should be within the contractor's maintenance.
yeah, absolutely.
It's not like we're asking the province for money on this. We're asking for what should be regular maintenance. And again, some of the ditches we're happy to clear, but. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you can send some details through for estimates, I can get that question in and see if we can get something, break the logjam.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, we're nearly out of time, and I'm sure Jeremy has to get to where he's going. Yep.
I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to hopefully give you some ammunition for advocacy on our healthcare, transportation needs and other things. And just yesterday, we received a presentation at the Regional Hospital District from Doug Hackett, who runs a volunteer drivers group in Squamish that his purpose is to transport folks to medical appointments. And the intersection between these two issues, I think, is something that is to me is a strong proof point of why action should be taken, and that is investments in, as we've heard throughout the Sea to Sky corridor, in healthcare and in transportation to connect these two. Because right now, the system that's being provided to us in both those categories has a massive hole in it, which is this level of service that requires transportation and the transportation itself. And if you haven't yet connected with Doug and his group, we can get you some information there. But to me, it's a great story of how community rises to address these things, but it's also a story of our system failure to really deliver. So I just wanted to highlight the importance of the intersection of these two things and the value to multiple ministries as you do your work. So just a quick proof point there for you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm aware of the ride network, but I haven't met with Doug yet, so I'll get some more information.
Okay. Thank you to you both for your time today and for the continued work on behalf of our region. We look forward to seeing you again really soon.
Okay. Likewise, thanks to all of you. It's great to be able to work with you and back each other up on some of these things. So we'll keep plugging away.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. You too.
Travel safe.
Bye.
Okay, let's move along. Let's skip ahead to Berkeley.
We actually should, I have not done some.
Oh,
Keep
okay,
going.
perfect. May I ask someone please to move the agenda, the consent agenda?
No, I have a question about that. This is just the one item on that. I have a question about that letter.
Yep.
What do we do with this correspondence for information? What do we do with that?
We can receive it.
No. Does the person get a response from us?
Not generally, but you could make a motion to respond if you like. And I can respond. Angela?
Thank you.
How would you
Angela
like to
Belsham,
handle it?
Director or General Manager of Corporate Services. Our process when we receive correspondence from the public is we let them know that their piece of correspondence is going to land on the agenda if approved by the chair. And we provide them with a link to the live stream that's happening and an opportunity on how to watch it afterward if they're not able to see it in real time, so that they can be a part of it, they can see the conversation that happened.
Thank you. You know, I just think it's a very thoughtful letter. It's very well written. And I think it deserves some kind of response from us.
We, on every letter that gets sent, we don't really have capacity to respond to each one. On this one specifically, I, as the CAO, reached out to the letter writer, letting them know of the presentations that were happening today, so that it was on their radar, and it would be of interest to them.
Okay.
So there has been additional correspondence because of the agenda for today.
Right. Okay. I'm pretty comfortable responding back to the letter writer to let know. Kind of reiterate that the board appreciates the letter and will continue to fund the advocacy and some of the different channels that we've pushed on. So.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
You comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so would someone like to move the consent agenda in full? Moved by Director Rainbow, second by Director Richmond, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And CAO verbal update, you have none? None today? Okay, let's move on to 7.2, and this is a direction request. We've got staff here to present. We do have members of the proponent here in the audience who are here with interest to our discussion. They are in the event that there's a question that we would like them to answer. Depending on the question, we can ask them to answer, but that would be at the chair's discretion. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Claire Dewar, General Manager of Planning and Development Services. So I will give an overview of the staff direction request report, lightly touch on the materials submitted by the proponent, Fir Creek and New Vision, and then I welcome any questions from the board. As mentioned by the chair, members of the Fine Piece Fir Creek development team are present and may respond to questions if requested to do so by the board. And this is as per policy 4.3 in the SLRD planning procedures board policy. So the direction request is to seek board direction on how to proceed with the Fir Creek and New Vision proposal from Acoustics, which was submitted on behalf of Fine Piece Fir Creek Development Limited, and then next steps in the context of the SLRD regional growth strategy. The purpose of this report is to share information about a potential significant development application for the board's consideration and initial review as per section 4.1 of the SLRD planning procedures policy, and this is a board policy. High level sort of context background, the Fir Creek is designated a master planned community under the SLRD regional growth strategy, and the current comprehensive development 3-zone provides for 870 residential units, as well as a minimum of 120 units of non-market affordable housing, up to 120 resort hospitality units, and just over 2,000 meters squared of commercial floor space, private marina, new fire hall, and community facilities. The property owner, Fine Piece Fir Creek Development Limited, is interested in exploring a new vision for the Fir Creek neighborhood, including additional densities. These additional densities have been communicated in the ballpark of, say, 2,000 to 5,000 residential units. This would trigger an RGS amendment as well as official community plan and zoning amendments. The report, direction request report outlines the RGS amendment criteria as well as process and then options for consideration by the board. Wanted to touch briefly on the RGS amendment criteria and process. So the process to initiate an RGS amendment is by resolution of the SLRD board. On receipt of a resolution, the staff prepare a preliminary report. This would be referred to the RGS steering committee to make recommendations for the board's consideration on whether the amendment would be considered a minor or a major amendment. And then the SLRD board ultimately makes assesses the application in terms of the minor amendment criteria and determines if the amendment application should be treated as that minor or major amendment. The staff report includes the minor amendment criteria. This particular example would be really looking at that regional significance component and noting that any amendments above and beyond the minor amendment criteria are considered a major amendment and look to the Local Government Act in terms of process. I won't get into all the details of the Local Government Act aspects around the preparation and adoption of procedures, only to say that the major amendment follows the same procedures for preparation and adoption as would an initial RGS, preparing an initial RGS. The processes are the same. Looking to the proposal from the proponent, which is attached is included in attachment A. The proposal does not set an estimated density increase, as the proponent intends to conduct further work and study to understand the infrastructure and transportation capacities, which would inform the density increase proposal. It has been communicated that the new vision could tentatively consider anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 residential units, rather than the current 870 residential units. Akistics staff have indicated that should the board direct SLRD staff time to be allocated to work with the proponent to refine this vision or proposal, the proposal would then could come back to a future committee of the whole with that density increase proposal, along with detailed studies to support what that ask is or what that proposal is. In terms of staff's work to date, there was a meeting held in June of 2025 where initial feedback was shared around building heights, firefighting capabilities, transportation impacts, infrastructure, specifically around water. We know that's a limiting factor in how sound. Questions were raised around the employment base, benefits for Fray Creek and the regional district. It was generally communicated that the SLRD is supportive of moving away from single family development. And this is aligned with the small scale multi-unit housing legislation. And we also communicated the 15% inclusionary zoning requirement for non-market housing. The other piece of information that was shared with the proponents at that time was that it is likely that that the increase in density would trigger a major RGS amendment process, which includes considerable public engagement and unanimous approval from the 11 signatories of the SLRD Regional Growth Strategy. Did want to highlight back in February of 2018 that the RGS was amended to add growth management language specific to the master plan communities, indicating that zoning and OCP amendment applications that propose to increase density or area of existing SLRD master plan communities are not supported. So this policy language does provide clear direction that future growth and amendments that propose an increase in density or area would constitute a major amendment. That's staff's interpretation. That would noting that it is the board's role to assess an application and determine whether it's treated as a minor or major amendment. And that assessment requires an affirmative 2/3 vote of the board. In terms of process steps, mentioned this really briefly before, but really there would be a referral to the RGS steering committee about the minor or major amendment criteria and determination, a resolution from the board to initiate an amendment, preparation of and adoption of a consultation plan. Then there is a notification to all affected local governments and Minister of First Nations. These are if it was a major amendment. Consultation, and then that unanimous acceptance piece that was mentioned. I'm not gonna get too far into what the Area D OCP and Area D zoning bylaws indicate, other than we do have that cap on that 870 residential dwelling units in both of those bylaws, so they would require amendments. Wanted to touch on from an organizational or external impacts perspective, a major amendment is a significant undertaking, and it would involve the preparation and adoption of a consultation plan that is adopted by the board. Looking at financial implications, any further work undertaken by SLRD staff will be on a cost recovery basis through a formal agreement or through development application fees. Any amendments, and then looking at the specifically around truth, reconciliation, and Indigenous relations, staff wanted to highlight that any amendments to the SLRD regional growth strategy would include early and ongoing engagement with First Nations, and staff have recommended that engagement with First Nations be included in any initial steps of the proposal or vision refinement. So the options that are included in the staff report, option 1 is to direct staff time to be allocated to work with the proponent on detailed studies and the vision proposal refinement to be presented at a future committee of the whole meeting with staff costs addressed through a cost recovery agreement. Option 2 is to do not direct staff to continue working with the proponent. And then there is an option 3 other as directed by the board. We do have the attachment A available to as a presentation, and I would ask that that be pulled up. And as mentioned, I'll run as staff, I'll run through this information package that the proponent submitted, and happy to answer any questions, and members of the proponent team are also here. So next slide. Next slide as well, we spoke to this ask already. So the proponent is highlighting in their package that the sort of just general growth in the corridor, and that the unit allocation that's currently included in the OCP and zoning was established 30 years ago, and so questioning, is there a need to relook at that? Next slide, please. They look at the existing master plan and this, from their perspective, need for realignment with what we consider complete communities. Next slide, please. So this vision really is looking at this complete community concept, as well as focusing on a coastal destination, as opposed to right now, the emphasis is really on golf facilities. Next slide, please. So on that note, there is part of the revision looks to realign the golf course. The golf course amenity would maintain, it would be realigning the holes so that there'd be more public opportunity to engage with the oceanfront. Next slide, please. These are some renderings and just a sort of broad scope of what that revisioning could look like. Next slide, please. So one of the key aspects of this revision is looking at the hole on the golf course and how that could be transformed into a waterfront village. Next slide, please. These are just some renderings of what that could look like. Next slide, please. Yeah, and next slide, please. I'll let the applicant. So in summation, this attachment and package really is looking at this complete community concept and how additional density would enable more amenities, more employment opportunities, and more of a complete community from their perspective, looking at what we in the SLRD RGS define complete community as. Look, there would be an opportunity to look at housing access that connects people to the waterfront, and as well looking at how amenities between, say, Britannia Beach and Furry Creek could be planned out in concert or in tandem. So next steps that are outlined in this proposal package were really to look at the regional growth strategy and how to achieve those goals, as well as the vision for Furry Creek, and to see how if there's an opportunity and what that opportunity would look like to consider additional densities, and under that vision, advanced development in Furry Creek. So I'll leave it at that and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I will caution the board before you get into picking the color of the drapes, that this is a whether or not we're interested in considering this coming back into the process, because we tend to go down the, what kind of energy supply are we gonna have, and where's my boat gonna be parked kind of thing. Like, let's not get there. Let's really restrain ourselves to the process and whether or not this is going to start into the process. So just to set the stage there, Elizabeth. I'm gonna go to Director Birch Jones first, and then Director Pettengill, and I've got a whole list now.
Thank you. I will not think about the color of the drapes, but I really appreciate that comment. But I am going to go, just big picture. In here, we're talking about going from the 800 odd to 2,000 to 5,000. However, in the presentation, it says just to support full services, we're talking about needing 10 to 15,000. So I guess we should, those gaps are too big for me. I need to sort of know which level of population we're contemplating. Thank you, when we get there.
Thank you. Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Yeah, start with a question for now. You mentioned sort of a major RGS amendment and implied, I think, OCP amendments and so on. In my mind, this would also be strategic plan change and or significant work plan change to even get there. So this is is that accurate, or does staff see this as sort of consistent with our current strategic plan and work plans?
Thank you. So through the board, I'll speak to the staff work plan component first of that question. And that is really the direction that staff is seeking today. This is not on our work plan. And so is the board directing staff to prioritize this project? What would that look like? If we were to receive direction from the board to continue working with the applicant, it would involve some sort of cost recovery agreement. We don't have an application before us right now, and that we could be looking to contracting services to support with that, as we don't necessarily have the capacity on staff at present to address the volume of work that this project could be bringing on. So those would be questions that staff would be needing to look at. So if we received through a cost recovery agreement funds to directly cover staff time, it wouldn't necessarily take away from other work priorities if this was parsed off and addressed through, say, a contract planner, which we've done, say in Tiger Bay context. We've had brought in contract planning services to address some of our larger development application needs.
If I follow up, my recollection on Tiger Bay and Furry Creek when it came through before was a significant amount of board time as well. So it is, I think.
Yes.
not just something we can subcontract it. So-
Yes, yeah, that's a fair, absolutely fair comment. In terms of the strategic plan alignment, we see that the RGS has a number of goals, and complete community is one of the goals under that, and the RGS goals align with the strategic priorities, and I think we would be using the strategic priorities to inform any revisioning, and whether we're looking at housing or natural environment, and looking at the full 11 climate action, looking at the full 11 goals and the strategic priorities, and how they would be used to inform any of that revisioning process. And I will say that's work that staff would need to be fleshing out and hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, okay. I have Jack, then Armin, then Jenna, then Lori, then Tony.
Thank you. Can you explain, please, the comment that there was interest in doing some sort of regional investigation into the amenities at Britannia, and like, what's the scope of that? I think of this as a request for you and us to spend a bunch of time on this specific site. What would it look like for that to expand beyond the borders of Furry Creek?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. That's a great question. What was mentioned by the proponent is the interest to ensure that we don't have a duplication of amenities, that although we are looking at a complete community within Furry Creek, we don't need to be building an elementary school in Furry Creek and an elementary school in Britannia Beach. We already are doing that planning work, ensuring that we are providing for an elementary school and a high school. So that's one example, but it's also around what type of employment opportunities could land in Furry Creek, and how does that relate to what's being planned out in Britannia Beach. So the scope of this application is to the Furry Creek neighborhood, and the proponent is really looking to see what is not being provided for in adjacent communities, and how could that be provided for at Furry Creek.
And as you said, that's work that I've understood you've done over the years and brought to this table. Do you feel like there's an opportunity here for significant revision or reconsideration of that work, or are you comfortable with the work that was done previously and happy to move forward with it as it is?
Yeah, thank you. So through the chair, the work that's been done to date has been extensive and comprehensive, absolutely. If there was an increase in density at Furry Creek, that would trigger an increase in other needs. And I think that's the piece that would be explored, is what type of other community amenities, what type of recreation facilities. That's the type of stuff that would need to be explored when you are getting into more people living in an area. And I think one of the interesting components too that would be contemplated is more that employment base and what that looks like. And that's a question mark for staff, absolutely. All right.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the pieces of this had in the past has been our increase of the province around governance, basically a governance piece. So if this was to build out at the highest number we saw here, I know there's lots of steps between here and there. We're looking at a substantial population that I think regional districts, including this one, are ill-equipped to address from a governance model to deliver all those things. And I just wonder, in all of the work that was sort of laid out, RGS and OCP and so on, where does that part fit, and the impact to in those goals, assessing those, what might be appropriate for an RGS or OCP or particular property in this case? How are we assessing the organizational impacts and like government and then governance of, like I'm thinking bylaw, business licensing, if we're looking at this already, I think we're getting stretched to the point where, and that's something we haven't taken on, like those sort of organizational impacts, and how does that fit in this And if not in our process now, do we have to contemplate this? Because the scope here is quite substantial, and I think if I boil down to a lot of the concerns around the table, I think that's where they're best addressed is through, we've talked, what Howe Sound East as a holding name for a future municipality here. How does that, as a possible solution at some point, where does that piece fit in all of this? And it's a big, I know it's a big, it was a huge question there. The first part is, I guess, is, yeah, anyway.
Let her answer.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, thank you through the chair and the questions around incorporation of Howe Sound East and what that looks like and when that might happen have been questions for many years, as has development in Howe Sound been a question for many years. We have had development rights in Howe Sound for a number of years, and those have not been built. So this is where it's really difficult to know when we would shift the governance model. We have development sitting at Porto Cove we haven't received building permit applications for. We have development that we worked for a couple of years on a zoning and OCP amendment for Furry Creek. This also, we aren't seeing development happening. So we have, at the direction of the board, reached out to see, what would that process look like? When does that come on? We have been told that, we're not there yet. What the population trigger is, those are questions I believe would be involving the province. I can look to CAO Paul to kind of add to that conversation.
I don't have the month on me, but there was a report that created the board about that, and we did inquire with the province, and the province was very clear that not now and not anytime soon, and that their threshold is much higher. When we look at towns with populations of under 1,000 people, the interest isn't there at this time to continue down that road, and their threshold is significantly higher is the messages that we were receiving. Now, of course, I don't always change. We do have that report, which I can reshare with the board now that it's quite a significant conversation.
Yeah. Just a comment on that. I remember that report distinctly, and my takeaway from that was that the process which Okanagan Falls has just gone through as the newest municipality is just to remind everybody that there needs to be an issue log, and then you need to connect those issues to the solutions being a new local government, which you could also say that's paraphrasing. We don't do forward planning on this. We do wait for the issue to develop even when you see it coming, and then we'll react to it. And that seems to be the provincial approach to this, which I find really challenging. And in other developments that are sizable, think about the recently Garibaldi at Squamish that went through a different process that had an EA certificate. This governance piece, I think, was front and center and was of similar size. So I feel like we may need to re-engage with this as far as an advocacy piece or something in here. And if the province doesn't have thresholds for this, we need to figure this piece out, because I think this is the crux of much of this is that piece. I realized I couldn't turn that into a question for anyone, so I will step back.
And maybe if staff can offer that governance piece, hearing the importance of that to the board, that could be direction to be looked at as a next step, along with infrastructure or engaging with First Nations. I think these are all really big questions.
Go ahead, Jen. Thank you.
Just to pick up on some clarity there, though, if we center the governance piece, a new municipality still has to adhere to the regional growth strategy, correct? So they're not, we'd still have to go through a major amendment like that. That work still lands at this table.
Yeah, yes, and to confirm as well through the chair that the OCP and zoning are also inherited by any new municipality.
Thank you for that. My question is kind of on this history piece, both for the RGS. So in your presentation in the staff report, we made some substantive changes for the growth management text in 2018. Do we have a timeline for when we review the RGS, or is it just at the discretion of the board?
Yes, thank you. So through the chair, we are required to consider a review every 5 years. And that we did do a review at the board's direction that was adopted in 2025. And that was focused on climate action policies. So it was a minor review. We haven't conducted a major review since those growth management policies were brought in.
Thank you for that. But at that time, when we directed the minor amendment, we did a review of the RGS and decided that we just need the minor amendment, that there wasn't supposed to do a major amendment at that time. Correct?
That's correct, yes.
And then I just wondering if you can speak to the history of the 870 units. I know that this was something that I still have a hard time wrapping my head around, but it was something that really dictated the previous rezoning application because that was the inherent right, as far as I remember. Yeah, I'm just wondering if you can speak to where that number came from and how it fits into our RTS.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So the 870 units were, those stem back to the initial preliminary layout approvals that were granted by Ministry of Transportation and Transit, now it's called. And those, that 870 units, we didn't even have, the area was unzoned at the time. So it was just the preliminary layout approval and the Section 219 covenants that were registered on title that included those development rights. And then those were rolled into, when we did bring zoning into the area, those were honored and addressed through the zoning process. And then how that relates to the, I guess how that relates to the RGS is that it's been the understanding of staff that any further development would trigger or any further development rights would trigger an RGS amendment. So those, I guess that's kind of how that's the history and how that's tied in. The preliminary layout approval predates the RGS and the zoning.
Just one quick follow-up, does the zoning then nullify the previous rights? Or do they still stand regardless of the zoning?
So, I mean, there we're really looking at, my understanding is that we're looking at the development, like the Section 219 development agreements that are registered on title that limit the residential dwelling units. And that now is a tool that we also have our zoning and OCP, but those covenants as well as the preliminary layout approval have been since the development was initially contemplated and subdivided. They've been in place.
I have Director Hopful next.
I think some of my questions have been answered. I think that I do want to peek at that end vision and, you know, understand the long-term vision of the development and specifically whether the intent is to eventually incorporate as a municipality. I feel like it is. So I think that there'll be a lot of costs with time and staff. So I like the idea of the cost recovery agreement idea and specifically the contract planning because of the cost and the process. So I know, I think I want the same answers as everybody else. Will it be incorporate into a municipality? And again, I feel like it will. So, you know, I don't think I have a question either. So I know that you were looking for some direction. That's what I think is that we should go for the contract planning and cost recovery agreement. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, yeah, staff would decide on how they're gonna manage the workflow.
Right.
It's really up to the board whether or not this is interesting and do we wanna deal with this now or?
Yeah, I think this is so interesting. Like
Okay.
this is a major development and you know, and it's a long time coming, right? I mean, I think that there's a lot of development down there and that's the area to do it.
Tony, you're next on my list.
All right. Yeah, a question for us really to start with is, you know, when I first started here 12 years ago, I looked at big master plan communities for Britannia Beach, Ferry Creek and Porto Cove. And now after 12 years, I look at it and there's still in our planning documents, but nothing, there's been no real development. With the exception of Britannia North, which is quite a sort of a separate piece. So, you know, why isn't that? And part of it is, you know, you look at the numbers involved, and can you have a fully self-sustainable community with that number of units? And I think developers have told us over the years, no, we can't. You know, it doesn't work. It's not. You know, what you're forcing people to look at is that we've got this land, we've got permission to build so many houses. Why aren't they being built? Because economically it doesn't work right now. But might it work if it were expanded? And just keep in mind, this is not an application to start building 2,000 homes tomorrow. This is a vision. This is looking to the future. How is house sound going to develop? And if we think about it, the pressure from Metro, we certainly feel, even in the number of years I've been at Ferry Creek, I've seen an increase in the numbers of people that come up from Metro, and that's only going to expand as we move forward. So that's one thing, and then talk to people about different ministers from time to time about development around house sound on the other side of the sound. Where are we? So the west side of the sound. It's unlikely that there's going to be development there. The infrastructure that would be needed to make that possible, it would be so expensive. And so that's likely to stay fairly wild in a way, with the odd campsite, the odd cabin here that here and there. But on the east side of Howson, we've already got the highway. And since the improvement of the highway, it's increased the numbers of people that come in. We've seen explosion of population in Squamish. I'm not quite sure what the stats are for Pemberton, but that's increasing. There's going to be pressure on that Ferry Creek, Britannia area, and I think we need to look. We need to start looking at it now. It's not something we should just put aside and say, okay, well, we'll deal with it in the future. You know, we've got some interest by a property owner in Ferry Creek. We've got some ideas put forward to us here. And I look at option one, and it says that the staff costs, what does it say there? Addressed through a cost recovery agreement. So, of course, anything like this, you're going to get some pressure on staff time, but most of the work we can contract out. That's a question to you. You can answer that one for me in a minute. But I would urge us to run with this. Yeah, I think it's quite an exciting proposition. If I were a bit younger and I was looking forward to that, I think I'd love to live in a seaside village on House End. You know, and
Careful now.
What do you mean careful now? I didn't say that. And there is.
Tony, right ahead, say the thing. I do.
I'm not quite sure what joke I just made, to tell you the truth. Anyway, so my question is, I guess, about how our manager thinks about the cost recovery agreement, and my comment is, I hope we can find a way to move forward with this, at least to get some more questions answered, and to some encouragement to the landowner to explore further.
Thank you. I have Director Richmond, then Director Pettengill, and then.
I'll save my comments till later. I think we're still in questions, right? I'm just trying to remember the history. You know, we talked about how it was unzoned. It was about 8-10 years ago, I believe, that it went from unzoned, and the request for the units down towards the water, like the existing 807 units that are contemplated. I'm just trying to remember the history. That happened about 10 years ago, did it not? And there was sort of I believe there was a conversation at the time that was, if the board would contemplate the 807 units closer to the water, then the end zone and the area up above the golf course would no longer be in the picture for future development. Do you remember that part of the conversation? Is that correct?
Yeah, so thank you. So through the chair, the area was unzoned and there was the preliminary layout approval issued from the province, from Ministry of Transportation, and there were two covenants on title. And those covenants outlined the development rights, and that was that 870 residential unit cap. Which also, like, there have been homes built at Furry Creek, so that includes those homes as well. And when zoning was brought in, the preliminary layout approval, the rights from that preliminary layout approval, as well as the covenants, were brought forward through the zoning. So the zoning was brought in to reflect what the covenants on title dictated. Then the rezoning that was adopted in 2023 looked at, we have the same unit allocation. Let's move away from single family homes. Let's explore higher density buildings. Let's bring more of that towards the water. And so that is where we started to see the shift in location of the residential dwelling units.
Thank you for that, because that's vaguely how I remember it, and I remember the discussion being, let's take the 870 allocation, move it towards the water. Let's change our vision a little bit towards more density. There was obviously buy-in from the board to do that at the time. The density seemed better placed and relatively isolated down by the water. It wouldn't be a big visual impact. We talked about visual impact from across the water at the time, but that was a step in a new direction 3 years ago, to take those 807 units and move them down to the water. Again, with considerations like visual impact, highway impacts, environmental impacts, and again, that move was decided on. So I just want to point out that piece of history, because we talk about how this was a master plan community of a size that should have been considered. There's already been a shift in thinking here, and I was for that shift a few years ago, and I think it was the right way to go. I just want to show us the progression of where this has gone. We went from maybe something on the hill above to let's move it down to the water with higher density, to now we're talking about 870 units to 5,000 units down by the water. So, and just to tie it all the way back, it's 2,000 to 5,000 units, which means 2 to 3. So that we could be talking a population of 10 to 15,000 people down there, quite easily. So that was sort of from my own memory and for the reminder of the board how we got here in the first place. Thank you.
And through the chair, just one add to that, sort of, where has the evolution of this vision been going, or coming from and going to? The vision that's being put forward by the proponents, this revision concept looks at taking it one step further from, let's bring higher densities closer down towards the water. It's really shifting the golf course, so that the vision would be shifting the golf course, looking at trying to develop on flatter pieces of land. In that Furry Creek has a lot of topography, and that in and of itself has challenges. And I think the team that's working with Fine Piece Furry Creek development right now has communicated that the golf course is taking up a lot of the prime location for community development. And is there an appetite to reconsider how the golf course fits in with community planning there? And so that's one of the concepts that could be looked at in future. So I guess just following on that question about the vision and where that's at now, where that came from, and then what's being presented today. I think that's an important piece of information.
Before I go to Chris, I'm going to go back to Tony, because I think he wants to.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Director Richmond's recollections, if you like, that when we started reconsidering the zoning, or when we started considering the zoning, there were 240 units planned for the water, for the waterfront area. There were 240 townhouses. They only ever built 56 of them. But there were 240 provided for. And I don't think that we changed the number of units that were going to be built in that waterfront area. That's called lot, what lot is that, lot 2. I don't think we increased the number of units. What's 240, so 180, 190 units were already scheduled to be down there. And if we did increase it, it wasn't by much. Most of the development was on the east side of the highway.
Exactly, and that got moved down.
No, it didn't get moved down.
The unit.
So through the chair, I guess maybe part of the density increase down by the water, there is a vision for higher story buildings, which would have higher density living towards the water on that lot 2. And then the other aspect of pieces shifting locations, we did look at the commercial was relocated, commercial and community facilities were relocated. That was another piece of the shift.
Okay, Chris, you're next, and then Jack, and then I think I'd like to get to I think everyone's had lots of chances.
So I want to check in on the 870 units and make sure, and I think I got this clarification a few years ago, so I want to make sure I'm still correct, that the province effectively, one way or another, enabled or allowed for 870 units, but we as a body were not obligated to provide that. So it wasn't a provincial mandate we were required to follow. As a body, we chose to support that. Is that accurate, or was this 870 units was dictated by the province as something we absolutely had to do?
So the 870 units were development rights that were granted through covenants that were registered on title. So when we brought zoning in, the zoning aligned with the development rights that were already had already been issued for the properties.
Okay, so the province did essentially mandate this level of.
Yeah, so through the preliminary layout approval, and the SLRD was party to those covenants as well.
Okay. And I just want to dig into this complete community question, because I think I voted against this, arguing that it wasn't a complete community from my perspective. And then we've had ongoing discussions about CACs and how we mitigate for that gap and so on. So I'm just wondering if you can explain, like, what is our perspective on whether or not what we've approved is a complete community in fact? And I guess the board has effectively said through a vote that it thinks it sufficiently is, but from a planning perspective, would we say this sort of meets our definition of complete community?
Thank you, sir. Through the chair, the current development or the proposed revision, or just the current? So I would offer that the 870 residential units has felt like a cap for staff, like that we haven't explored what something further could look like. And it was, how do we make a complete community out of 870 units? I guess the question has never been formally put forward or formally explored. Would it be more complete if there were more dwelling units allocated? That question I think is up for consideration through additional studies.
Fair for now.
Okay, Jack,
I was going to make move option 1.
okay,
Oh, I'll second that.
second that.
Yeah.
Option 1. Option 1 is to allow staff to proceed and decide how they're going to allocate staff time, bring in contractors, whatever is required. That's not up to us. It's whether or not we're interested in seeing this come back. So it's moved and it's seconded. Would you like to speak to it?
I feel that I am committed to nothing on this, aside from a commitment to understand this better, to invest the proponents' resources in finding out what this could and should look like, and potentially bringing it back in front of us for our consideration. I am really interested in the question that Ms. Dewar was just talking about, like, would more units create a more complete community? I am interested in how we deal with the highway. And I think and hope that this investment helps us understand that better. I'm convinced that not investigating things is not an approach that I think is reasonable or logical. I think we should investigate thoroughly, understand it well, and commit the resources to doing so. So I'll be voting in favor.
Yeah, I'll put you on my list. Okay, Armin, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I just sort of, if I can at this point, I just have a question about I'm just struggling with the difference between option 2 is for a submission to come, and then the organization would need to process that submission and the course of work, and what we're doing now, which is pre-submission work, is what's been proposed here. Is option 1 prioritizing this work above other things, and option 2 is allowing our processes to run in due course? Like, so I'm just trying to understand. It doesn't say here option 1 to me doesn't scream that we are prioritizing this work, adjust work plans, deprioritize other initiatives of the organization. And I just, could we get some clarity on that? I'm not taking position either way. I'm just want to make sure I understand what I'm voting on.
I think, yeah, so option 1 is staff, go ahead and let this get to the first step. They're not at the starting line yet. Option 2 is you tell staff, you are not working on this.
But option 2 is inviting the proponent to.
No, it says do not direct staff to continue working with the proponent.
In
to
advance of
refine
a
this.
formal application submission.
Right,
So then they make
so
that.
the proponent is welcome to put in a formal application.
Yeah,
They have not yet done that.
so,
So maybe the language is to,
yeah, I just want to make sure that it's not, don't advance.
I'm gonna go to Heather for.
So I'm just curious about the prioritization thing. Is that the question we're being asked right now?
No.
Thanks. You know, the prioritizations happens on an operational level and there's a lot of moving parts. It's really this, by choosing option 1, we can get in advance of some of the questions that will come up during, if we chose option 2, and we can cost recover it, which would save us time in the long run. So it's an approach that General Manager Dewar is taking, and I think it addresses it more efficiency and cost recoveries at the same time. But I would look to General Manager Dewar.
Yeah, yes, thank you. So through the chair, I think one of the distinctions between option 1 and 2, and I recognize that the language could be more clear. The option 1 from staff's perspective provides staff an opportunity to work with the proponent on that vision versus us reacting to a proposal that's submitted. So do we want to be involved upfront? Do we want to be providing direction to the proponent on that vision in advance of that application submission? I think some of the questions that would help are really around that infrastructure, transportation, and First Nations are really key, and governance was also another one that was brought forward today. I think those are all really important questions, and it would be hard for staff to I would say that it would be helpful for staff to have more information before receiving an application.
So comment, just then I'll support this. I was concerned that this was, reshuffle everything and this is the highest priority of the board. I just want to make sure that's not what this is, but I do think that working with the proponent to address the concerns and to investigate these matters and to see what's possible and what's reasonable I don't know that those are both the same thing, as this work goes forward. So I'm happy to see that, and I think there's opportunity here to potentially improve from what's already been approved, but that's just opportunity. I don't know that that's what that is, and hopefully this further work will clarify whether this what's proposed is an improvement for all those reasons. So I'll support this instead.
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't gonna support this, but hearing this discussion, I think I'm inclined to, but for clarity, I think the first step before any significant work goes into this is a discussion on what's our strategic sort of work plan, and then RGS and those things. And so some of that actually might be for the next board to decide, is this for the next, the next strategic plan? Is this where the organization's focus needs to be? I think back to, and I was an alternate for a lot of it, but this was a huge, what was just approved was a huge amount of organizational time. And I opposed it because I didn't see a complete community, and I was not, I didn't, my vote didn't carry the day, and here we are back with the proponent asserting now, like a year later, oh, it's not complete. And we're still having, battles about the CACs in relation to, dealing with the amenities that aren't there. And so I'm feeling a bit frustrated at this, and I'm sort of wondering, like, even what we've seen here, what problems of the regional district is this solving? I see that it solves some proponent issues maybe, but when I think about, like, how does this not, have a smaller, worse impact on the highway, but how does this actually pull a bunch of existing traffic, never mind what this would add, off the highway? How does this provide income to, 90% of the new residences are accessible to people living below the BC median income? If there's things like that, then that's solving really big problems we're having, and then it becomes a lot more exciting. But what I see here so far is sort of an expanded luxury community, and that's not the thing. I think when I look at our strategic plan, the priorities we're struggling with, how much resources and focus do we put that towards everything else we have to do is. So again, a bit more investigation, but I'm just trying to put some framing around where my mind was and what I would need for this to become a priority in the future.
Thank you. I won't repeat a lot of that. I have similar concerns. I wasn't inclined to support this coming in. The most compelling point I've heard in terms of moving forward is what Director Compton said in terms of an approach of exploration. That's an approach I like to think I always take, is let's make sure we know what we're deciding on, and be clear with the information. So I respect that. However, I really want to make sure this does not bump any other part of the work plan or priority. Recognize, so I would put a friendly amendment just to be clear on that it's 100% cost recovery on there. I would add that to the resolution, and recognizing even if we go out to contractors, there's still an impact on our staff. There's still going to be capacity up through it. I would just like to make the point that this is very low on my development priorities in terms of where staff puts their time. I would expect that there would be an ensuing conversation about how the time gets allocated and priorities are allocated. I will support it for the point of exploration. I would also just caution that I have similar concerns that we're building a luxury neighborhood, a luxury commuter neighborhood for the regional district. What does that bring? What benefit does that bring to the region that we're governing in general? I don't see it, so I would caution to the proponent that I will support this, but that does not indicate support for the vision at this point in time for me. But I was supportive for the point of exploration.
Jack, you were next on my list.
Well, I attached myself to Director Richmond's comments. But I would say, I don't think we have, when we say luxury, none of that has been discussed here. Like, my expectation is that all of that is going to be part of this investigation, and what kind of amenities need to be drawn into this and what kind of neighborhood it needs to be. But to the point at the beginning about, let's not pick color of the drapes, it seems to me like there's lots of feedback that's gonna come back to us as a result of this, which I think will be good. But I agree with your view that we don't need the most expensive units in British Columbia to be on this. Bottom
Thank you. Jenna?
Thank you. Through the chair, I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. While I appreciate that we miss every opportunity we don't explore, we also waste a lot of time, energy, and goodwill with our communities on engagement when we continuously chase all the shiny things that come forward. We have a very large plan of things that we want to do. We have an OCP amendment for Area C that is in line before we do an OCP amendment for Area B. And I hear that this is cost recovery. It still takes time and capacity. It still takes the community to engage after just doing 6 years of engagement on something that we said we were going to deliver, which we knew wasn't going to be entirely a complete community, but it was as close as we were going to get it with the development rights that existed. We have really strong language in our regional growth strategy that we want to pursue complete compact communities. That doesn't mean that every development we're going to do is going to be a complete community. It means we focus our development on settlement areas, on the municipalities that already exist. And there are constraints and strong language that the master plan communities are going to make do with what they have. It's not going to have absolutely everything that community needs, but it's going to be enough for their day-to-day needs, and they may need to travel. So there's definitely opportunities that we might be missing, but I've never seen where we rezone and increase density and development rights to necessarily lead to better management and growth through the corridor. I speak to 870 units that are approved and haven't been built, and there are the 120 affordable housing units in there that we desperately need. And now we need to just increase the density in order to make those happen. I understand that there's market forces at play here, that this market is very different than it was even 6 years ago. I have no interest in spending our time making it work for the developer. We have another 11,000 units that are approved and unbuilt in the district of Squamish, and I suspect you could say the same for any other region across any other community across our region. And so I think that this is not something that, based on our policy direction, that we want to start chasing in this current moment. Maybe later, not now.
That was great, well articulated. I bear the concern about prioritizing this, and so I'm appreciative of Director Richmond's comments to not putting this ahead of anything else. I was cautious when I first spoke with members of the development group, and but then I thought, let's test the board and see if there's any interest. I think, to your point, I was interested in hearing the comments of the board. So unless there's any big comment that wants to take us in a different direction, I'll call the question.
Just what
the view?
Yeah, well, I think I've been swayed by my colleagues. I'm sort of on the fence, and I think where we are, it is maybe for the next board to have a strategic planning or just discussion. That's maybe the more appropriate time. I think I'm sort of compelled that just.
Yeah. I'll go Tony and then Jenna.
Well, I support this motion. I think that this is a good time for us to take some initial steps in this direction, and then certainly this is not something that we can resolve between now and the election, but we certainly could have some information in place for the next board to consider. I support this.
Jenna?
Yeah, I will just make one last plea to my colleagues that if we do want to start to revisit where we want growth to happen through the corridor, that we do that in a fulsome way. Like Garibaldi at Squamish has emailed the district of Squamish again that they are reviewing their application. I suspect Britannia Beach would also be interested if there was an opportunity to do so. And so while I see that this is something that is here now, I would urge my colleagues to consider if we really do want to move away from the first component of our regional growth strategy, which is around focusing development in particular areas, that we do so in a cohesive way that looks at the region as a whole, as opposed to just the individual thing that's available to us right now. Okay. What?
I just would suggest Garibaldi and Squamish and this are very different. Very different.
Yeah. So thank you to everyone. I think this has been a good preliminary discussion. I will call the question. All in favor of allowing this to proceed to its first step? Anyone opposed? Okay.
Stoner.
And Director Demare, assuming you're in favor because you haven't put your hand
Yes,
up.
I'm
for
in
opposed.
favor.
Okay. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna call a recess now for,
Can I just thank?
you can do that offline.
Okay, let's go.
Come back at 11:15, please. Calling this meeting back to order. And we are still in our committee of the whole agenda. We are at 8.1 verbal update from me, and I have nothing for today. We've got lots to talk about still. Moving on to a request for funding from the Mountain Valley Institute for the Sea to Sky, the presentation that we just heard an hour ago. Their letter is requesting for funding for $20,000 towards their study. However, he also mentioned in his presentation that it could cost up to $90,000. I feel like that's a big ask from an organization that has zero jurisdiction over train tracks. But I did hear from my colleagues that they're interested in exploring a feasibility. So I will put it on the floor for consideration if anyone wants to move. Sorry, do you have, oh, we have.
What
Yeah,
money we have.
where's the money gonna come from, Paul? Do we have any money for train track feasibility studies?
Our climate fund, for example.
Okay, well, let's hear what Colin has to say.
Yeah, it's a good question on where we could fund such a large like third-party request. I would say really the main source of funding that we would be able to use is Area A and Area B PIL funds. LG CAP funds have mostly been allocated to other projects, and growing communities funds are not eligible for third-party studies or funding unless we are owning the infrastructure, which in this case we wouldn't be taking on rail infrastructure. So that really does leave just Area A and B built, and we do have funds for that, but at $90,000, it is a substantial third-party request, and obviously PILT is used for a variety of projects and operational funding of services in the SLRD. So yeah, I'll leave it to the board to decide on whether they want to fund at that amount, but it is a large request for.
And also from our, this is my question, because I don't get to ask questions very much. Would we be able to sole source this to this individual organization, or would we need to go to an RFP to see if there's any other interested consultants?
May I, just for purposes of the discussion, are we talking about the request, the 20, or this later 90?
I think the request is for 20, and so
That's
the
what we're
letter
talking about.
request is for 20. But even if it's for $5, can we sole source this?
Yeah, I did. Their request states that they're a nonprofit, so we would be, if we were granting them $20,000 to conduct the survey, I don't think we would need to go through our procurement. They would be managing it, and it would be a grant through our PIL funds, similar to how we funded other organizations.
Okay. Okay, now I do have a list of people. I'm gonna go Mike, then Chris, then Tony, then Armand.
Quick two-part question. When you were just talking there, you were saying potential funding sources for 90. If we were to partially fund this at 20 or 30, that open up some other opportunities to fund this?
I still think those two PIL funds would be the best source of funding. It is an easier amount to manage at 20,000 versus 90. That being said, we could always bring back a report with other funding options, but as of today, I would say Area A and B PIL are the two that I could think of.
And then just in terms of the, sole sourcing and that, I feel as a nonprofit, if we're supporting the work, especially if we're not supporting it, funding it in its entirety, I don't think the sole sourcing should be a problem and look to our staff, but it seems to me that if we were to support a nonprofit component of their work and they were to find other funding for it, then we should be clear. I would like to see us participate in this, not fund it completely, but I would like to see us participate in this. I think similar to Director Rainbow's comments earlier, I think it's something that we need to consider for the benefit of our region, and we shouldn't wait for others to do it, even though we don't own the tracks. So I'd like to see us find $20,000 or $30,000 to support this study. I would say that I would put a caveat on that, in that if they don't find the other sort of funding to complete the study, then the funds get returned in whatever amount of time. And I'd be happy, if we don't want to pass the full resolution now, I'd be happy to have staff come back with other funding or opportunities within our budget to pay for this. But I would be ready to put a motion forward like that when the time is right.
Okay, I'm just gonna let other people ask their questions. Please don't get into comments until we've gone through the questions. Chris, your question.
Yeah, and I just, sorry if I missed this, but the $750,000 we put from, I believe it was Community Works Fund into regional transit. Is that not a potential source for
That was
this?
Growing Communities Fund.
Oh, Growing Communities.
That was Growing Communities Fund, and we were able to allocate that because we would potentially own infrastructure. It would be owned by a municipality in the SLRD. But third-party contributions are not eligible for infrastructure projects where we wouldn't own the infrastructure.
Okay, Tony, you're next. Your question? Question.
I feel I should say this. Colin said area A and B.
Yeah.
Area D is benefits from this as well. And I think it's reasonable to ask for a contribution from area B.
I was gonna make a note that we do have area D built as well. I sometimes only assume area A and B, but area B and D, because the train would be flowing through Squamish, so it would benefit area D residents as well.
And
So
C.
the three,
Does C have any pill left?
C doesn't get built. We only have A, B, and then the southern hills,
Right.
which is area D Squamish.
Yeah, so it would have to come from something in area C if we wanted everyone to participate, but this is a full board decision, so it's anyhow. Was that your question?
Was that a question? My question would be, would Southern Pilt be a reasonable source for 10 grand with 5 coming from A and B, which makes 20?
Okay.
That's the question.
Okay, Armin, you're next, then I have Sal on the screen, and then I have Lori, and then I'd like to get to a resolution.
Yeah, thank you. During your, so a couple of people.
I see you, Jack, thanks.
On page, what is it, 66, I think is of our agenda, it goes into the sort of the tiers that they're proposing. I'm assuming there's likely spaces between. We've been talking about $20,000-$30,000, like participating. I'm interested in participating. I am curious around if we support the basic analysis, which is a $20,000 piece, who owns it, and does it actually solve information gap that we have? Like, do we have some of this and we weren't able to share? We talked about that. We touched on it a little bit during the presentation, and there was discussion of NDAs around other work that we've done to support of regional transit. So I'm just not clear to me, if in our discussions, if we say that we can support for $20,000, are we supporting the delivery of that $20,000 basic analysis, or are we only supporting, would we only be supporting if they were able to secure the funds for one of the higher levels on their presented main? I guess that's a question for the board. The question I think I have for staff is, this type of analysis, do we have something adjacent to this? Would this address a gap in our organizational knowledge? And I respect that the answer to that might be a closed answer because of the proprietary nature of some of this work, but I would like to appreciate if I could understand some more context there before I made a funding decision.
So the travel demand study has data. That's the data that we're basing all the work with regional transit on. I think the data when it comes to rail is much different because it includes the last mile and all of the different impacts on the community as it goes through. It sounded like from the presentation that the 90,000 would include the critical data and 20,000 wouldn't. So I think you make a good point, but do you allocate 20,000 towards them accumulating up to 90,000? Or do you do the 20,000 basic? Yeah, that's.
I think what I've heard is that if we're putting in 20,000 from anywhere, it's to support them doing the whole feasibility study, but they have to go and find other funding sources for the remainder. And we're not really interested in in 5% of the job.
Trying to think of how to turn this into a motion to capture some of these nuances, so. I'll
So
turn my
we'll
mind to
come
that.
back
Thank you.
Director Demare, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I like the idea of the climate action fund that we get. We should be getting a new round this year. Am I correct?
We received 3 years of upfront payment. I believe our next payment from LGCAP is until 2027, but I can confirm that. But we did receive a 3-year upfront payment a couple years ago, and those have been mostly allocated. So there's very minimal funding left in LGCAP, but I could, like, if the board wanted to see a more robust source of funding options, we could bring back a report with some more details and additional, like, and balances. That would just probably be the easiest route to allocate LGCAP funds than doing it on the fly at the table today, but.
Yeah, I'm okay with the proposal from 10,000 from Southern Pelt and 5 each from Area A and Area B. But there's got to be a caveat there that they've got to seek the funding for the rest of it. I wouldn't go for any more other than that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura, you're next.
So for Peter Schultz, from Lillooet to Prince George, that whole initiative, we supported him for a full scale plan is what you've seen. We went through NDIT. So Northern Development Initiative Trust was actually funded. They have about $185 million through CN back in 2002 when they closed. So it was a good deal. Does the Southern region have any trust that we could seek funding from?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We only have the NDIT organization for the North.
Okay, so really, I think that I feel like this is a little bit late to the gate. There's only a few months left. I think that Jeremy was in it in September. He was at UBCM. He was kind of advocating for it there. Peter started in November. He's got a good plan there. And I think the province is going to do what they're going to do in July. And I think that if they were to have a pause on this, then I would say, yes, I would support this. But I don't think they are gonna have a pause, and $20,000, I don't know what that's gonna get us, so unfortunately, I'm not gonna support this at this time, but thank you.
Jack, you're next.
I share Lori's feelings. This all, including what we heard from NDIT, feels very disconnected from the owners of the line, of the decision-making process at the province. And I guess a letter coming to the table asking for $20,000 and then having it go to $90,000 with no sort of analysis from staff of what this gets us and how we'll use it is a little unfamiliar to me. I feel like if we feel strongly that a train service needs to be initiated and that we believe that it is a possibility, I'd like to hear a report from staff that talks about, like, why are we choosing this group rather than Stantec or some engineering firm that can do these reports in maybe a more comprehensive way. I know that there was an effort
8 years ago to go and get a full study done, and it was much more expensive than this. And it felt like that's what would be required to accomplish this task. And so I would just say I'm uncomfortable with a letter having us spend $20,000 to $90,000 without any sort of sense of how this study will be used and whether we think it's the right kind of study. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Chris, then Mike, and I think Mike's gonna make the motion.
I think I'm actually at comments.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion to support $20,000 towards this. I've been on a dozen calls and meetings about the rail future. One of the things that stands out to me is the different visions that different communities and stakeholders have for the rail line and how it can be used and what the future looks like. But what also stands out most for me is the lack of information we have. Whenever we sit in these conversations, we talk about, could we have passenger rail? Oh, the track's too curvy. We couldn't have it. It wouldn't be fast enough. There seems to be a real information gap. And for us to be able to go to the province with a strong case as a collection of communities to say, hey, we want to see the following. I think this helps fill that information gap. I think for $20,000, if we could put a caveat saying you go out and find the other 70, complete this study, I think it helps fill at least one important information gap. Is it the full study that might be required? No, but I think it gets us to July and whatever extension they do or don't give us, it gets us to a stronger position currently.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jack.
Does anyone on staff have an opinion as to whether this report assists us in understanding whether a train can go faster than 60 kilometers an hour? Any of the, do we have any advice from staff on whether this is a report that we should be pursuing? And have staff looked at other reports that we might want to consider pursuing?
Thank you. My preference would be, if time is not of the essence, that it be referred to staff and we bring back the options that include that. Our direction has not been to pursue rail at this time. Mostly because of the unanswered questions and the report that was done in, I want to say 2004, had a significant price to it that was nowhere near the regional transit. We do believe long term, it'll be there'll be a number of solutions to manage movement around the corridor, and rail could be one of them. I think my one comment would be the July deadline, I feel, is not a true deadline. They're not walking in and tearing up rail in July, especially because many nations have said they don't want that. So I feel like that highlighted deadline is not a true fear.
If they were repurposing the space imminently, then they would tear up the track. But we know there are dead tracks all over Canada that have been, and they leave them. They don't go out and tear them up. There's no value to doing that unless they've got a next step for that land, which we don't know if they do. I'll go back to Mike.
So question then for the CAO, if we were to put a resolution forward that ask staff to look at, and again, this is back to capacity thing here, so we're now creating work for staff as opposed to going for something that we might be able to just move ahead for. But if we were to ask staff to come back with study options for passenger rail, what kind of timeline, what kind of work does that require? I'll have a follow-up question on what I answer that one first.
Thank you. I was not thinking it would be that. It would be more about funding options and what we'd like to get out of it, instead of specifically, would we be owning and hiring a contractor for study options? That would be a lot more work. And it would divert from our current focus of regional transit. And that's where I would pull from capacity. And do we want to do that is a question. So I think perhaps the solution is, if there is a motion that people are comfortable with, that some caveats be that it be to fund the full 90,000. So it would be 20,000 on the condition that they receive the other funding, and on the condition that these data points are included in the study. And there were some really good data points that were raised in this conversation today.
So potentially with that motion, because that's essentially the motion I was going to put forward, with the exception of some of the data points. Would your preference from a staff level be that we defer it for a month and you bring back some of those suggested data points from staff as to what we would like to see from the study? And then we could put forward a motion saying we'll fund it up to, let's say, $20,000, as long as they find the other 70 to complete the study. And as long as we have A to E in terms of data points. Is that?
I'm gonna lean towards, my preference would be to motion today and relieve staff from bringing back a new report. I think that if your motion is crafted with those, then it would probably include what staff would bring forward as well.
Do you want me to give you a 5-minute recess to come back with a?
I mean, I'm personally, I think that they're on the right track in terms of what they're exploring. We could say things like, you know, the data points could be things like, you know, potential speed for passenger. I believe all that information is going to come through this study. If we want to be really specific, I'm happy to hear my colleagues add some of that specificity to it, but I'm not that, I feel like what they're proposing, I'm happy to support with a partial contribution. But if others are uncomfortable, it is an opportunity to add those requests.
Tony and then Armand.
Okay, before the motion hits the floor.
Yeah, it's not seconded.
Squamish people and I need to agree that we can put 10,000 out of the Sutton built. You can't assume that it's so.
I think we'd benefit from a 5-minute recess personally, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 5-minute recess.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Sal and we have Jack back online. Why are the owl's eyes flashing at me? They're stressing me out. Okay, coming back.
There we go.
And we've got the analysis levels from the request up on the screen for the benefit of everyone to see the basic analysis, intermediate analysis, or an advanced analysis. So I don't think we're considering the advanced analysis, so we can ignore that one, please. What we're considering right now is crafting a motion to support the $20,000 coming from the SLRD towards this support, towards the analysis. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. And let's, Colin, did you want to quickly speak to your thought process on where you would like to, or why? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important that if we're funding a project that we know that there will be benefit to the community. And I think that if we're funding 20,000 out of our reserves, that we're gonna see useful data from the analysis. And if we're looking for the intermediate analysis, and that's more in line with what the board would like to see, then that we do have that stipulation that the other funding is secured before we release our funding for that analysis.
Great.
I think that's everything I have to say.
And
Okay,
the only
thank
thing I
you.
would like to clarify is that I'm not sure putting guardrails on intermediate, because if they are able to get enough money to pay for the advanced, fantastic.
Yeah.
And we brought this up only to see if, do we want guardrails, or are we happy if they get no money? Is basic okay with us? So which is why this is on the screen.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you. So again, for me, this is about filling some of the information gap that we have. I would like to put a motion forward that the board fund $20,000 towards the basic analysis with the ability for the group to take that $20,000 and get more funding and go towards the intermediate. This is not on the motion, this is just my explanation, that they could take the money and go towards intermediate or advanced. But I believe even the basic analysis, and when you compare basic versus intermediate, it's not that huge a difference. I believe the basic analysis will give us helpful, useful information to go to the province with and help this conversation. So my motion is that we fund $20,000. Do I have to put funding source?
Yes, please.
From $10,000 from Southern Pilt, 5,000 from Area B Pilt, and 5,000 from Area A Pilt towards an analysis with MBI.
Thank you. And you are seconding it? Thank you. Does anyone have any comments at this point? Go ahead.
Just want to make sure, well, two things. One, that I appreciate the slide, but that is sort of sufficient that we all feel comfortable. That's enough detail about our expectations to, and so if staff needs to flesh that out before as well to provide a bit more specificity around those things.
Go ahead.
I guess a question that I would have is if we're providing them 20,000 without a contingency, when are we expecting them to complete the basic, or when is their deadline for getting to that intermediate? Like, are they just gonna, we wouldn't want them to just say, well, we didn't even try to get intermediate because we had the 20,000 and the basic was acceptable. So I don't know if there's that would be my only thought on that is
that's a timeline.
Ensure there's some progress towards trying to get to the intermediate.
Chair.
I have you, Jack. Mike, do you want to amend your?
I have to think about that for a second. I think that's a really good comment, but I'm just not sure how to translate that into the motion.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to Sal and then Jack.
Yeah, I like Colin's his first proposal. Because they can, we've done that. We just did that with the PRVCA on a similar funding project, where they have to show that they've got the other funding before they got our funding.
I guess a subject to criteria in a resolution.
Okay.
I guess in this we could, maybe a solution would be to fund 20,000 towards intermediate or advanced, and then have them bring back an update at X amount of time. And then if at that point they haven't received the funding, then there could be a second resolution to fund the $20,000 basic analysis. And that way there is kind of pressure for them to try and find additional funding. And you would have maybe some insight into whether there was sufficient fundraising done in that time, and then you can fund the basic if it's.
Yeah, this can be seed funding for them to show other funders that they have support from us. And therefore, maybe the province comes up with the rest of the money in a hopeful world. Jack,
They come back to us, and just for clarification, they would come back to us, let's say in a month, and say, we have received the other funding or we haven't, and we could then decide whether or not we want to go with the basic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They could even just a letter or something to the board of the current status, and then a second resolution could be passed for the basic fund analysis if that was desirable.
Jack, and then Laurie.
I'd like to make a motion that we refer this to staff and ask them to come back with a report.
We've already got a motion on the floor, I'm sorry.
I don't think it was seconded. Was it seconded?
It was seconded, yes. So.
Okay, then I would like to speak to the motion if I could.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm mindful that we're going to go back later today and we're going to continue a debate that was very sort of engaged and vociferous about $1,000 a year for childcare expense, and we had very strong opinions on that. And I am very uncomfortable about a letter to the board and a 5-minute presentation resulting in us writing a check for $20,000 and not knowing how we're going to use the report, whether it's the right kind of report for the purpose that we're trying to accomplish, whether this organization has experience doing the same kind of thing in other places. I think good governance would ask us to have our staff go away, do some investigation, and return to us with a recommendation.
Okay. Lori.
I concur with my colleague. I also want to ask through the chair to staff if some of the information that we have that we cannot release, is there any way that we could ask if that could be released and thereby help this analysis in any way?
No, we thank you. We've done that and we've pointed them to the area, to the places where they can go seek that. We can't narrow
We
that.
can't ask. Okay, right.
We're contractually.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so,
So I'd like to amend the motion to include, to say that we will fund $20,000 towards the intermediate or advanced funding, seed funding towards the intermediate or advanced study. And that the group come back to us with
confirmation that they've received other funding before they proceed with our 20,000. Okay, do I have a seconder for the amendment? Second. Thank you, Vivian. Comments to the amended motion? Go ahead.
I'm supportive of the overall, like the goal here. I tend to agree with Dr. Compton on there's a lot of nuances to this. This is their report, not our report, as it's been. This is to fund their pieces, not ours. And I think that some staff analysis around what the actual deliverable is. I understand sort of the goals of this, but I think that that we should take a pause and find a way to provide direction to staff to not just refer to staff broadly, and should we do this by going to the always thing, but like really narrow down the pieces we would like comment on to ensure that we are good stewards of these funds and get the outcomes that I think that there seems to be agreement on or to some level anyways around like what our sort of desired outcome is here, but I'm not convinced that this motion, even with its amendment, really gets us there and gives me the comfort that I would expect. And when I look at how other pieces of flown come across the table here and reporting requirements and so on, like I don't think this motion quite gets us where we should be, although I would like to see it happen. So I'm conflicted on this, but I don't think I can support it in its current in its current form, although I'm broadly supportive of the solution.
This will be my last motion. I feel like we're going down a path of overcomplicating things here. I think that's sometimes a tendency. I feel like we're trying to get some information. You know, we talk about Director Crompton's comparing this to childcare for some reason. We talk about funding for a million different things at this organization. I don't think we can connect one to the other and say, if you're going to pay for that, you should pay for this, or you shouldn't. I think we look at everything in terms of the value to our regional district and to our residents. I think there's $20,000 worth of value here for us to have stronger information in our hands to go to the province. If we had more time, if we had months and staff had more capacity, I would be supportive of let's get a little more information. Let's bring this back. I think the level of risk and the level of investment we're talking about here is not that high. And I think it will support us in our attempts to preserve rail in our region. So again, if we had more time, I would say sure, but I feel like we're overcomplicating and I'd like to see us move forward.
My comment to this motion is that I'm supportive of more information because it helps us, create the narrative, support the narrative that maybe rail is not viable, but maybe regional transit is even more needed in absence of rail. And so I don't see us taking this to rail is now our priority. We're going to put all our eggs in that basket. That is not what we are saying by this. We're saying more information is gonna help us make better decisions and hopefully make the province have better decision-making around regional transit. So that's where I'm interested in this. I don't see myself getting on a train next week. I do see myself fleshing out a better argument for regional transit and all of the, and if I'm right, that's great. If I'm wrong and it says, yeah, trains are the way, great.
Sorry, one last thing. With that in mind, I think maybe part of this should be that if we were to help fund this, whether it's intermediate or advanced, that we have access to this information so that we could use it in ways that you just described, so that this has value to us on a number of levels.
Absolutely. Even, yeah,
So I would add that, I'm gonna add.
yeah, I'd like you to amend the motion to add that as a condition that we own this information.
You gotta call the question on my other amendment first. Though.
Yes, on the amendment, calling the question.
Chair, I'd like to clarify my comment.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
My point, Director Richmond, to Director Richmond's previous point, is not to compare childcare to train service. It's to say that we are engaged in extremely robust processes about how we spend money. And those are thoughtful and they involve a significant amount of research by our staff and debate at the board. And I am concerned about a process in which a letter comes to the table asking for $20,000. The presenter then asks for $90,000. And we then in the same meeting approve a report that we haven't had our staff vet. So it's not about anything other than us, I think, being a little more careful about how we spend money. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the amended motion. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Opposed.
Okay,
That was on the
That was
amendment
on-
itself.
on the amendment itself?
Okay.
Yeah, on the amendment itself, so adding the stipulations that, now Mike is gonna add more stipulations.
But further amendment that by partially funding this, we the SLRD will have access to the information in the report.
Second.
Okay, thank you. On the amendment. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. On the amended motion.
Question. So just with this direction, so if I can,
Okay.
well, with this direction, then we're directing staff to have some sort of agreement, have them agree to something like is that what it is or how?
Do that. Colin, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I know what's automatic and what we need to explicitly direct. And
We often do contribution agreements. And so in that case, this would clearly be a contribution agreement.
Okay.
So
we don't need to explicitly say that staff agreed and enter into a contribution agreement, but like it's just we do this through way of motion as we're doing right now. Okay.
stipulation,
Well,
sometimes.
normally, if we are requiring a contribution agreement, the resolution states contribution agreement. We also have resolutions where it's contingent on some other item, and that can usually, like, for example, as Sal said, the Braylorn Pioneer Mines project, it was required of them receiving the grant.
So
And we can have the fund or require the fundee applicant, that's a better word. They can just notify finance. And then if those stipulations are met, then we would release the funding. So in this case, a contribution agreement might be complicated for this. But just requiring them to write a letter back to staff or the board with an update on, Heather, if you want to take over.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. I think once they confirm their funding to the full intermediate or advance, a contribution, if we give the money with a contribution agreement, that would say the data would be, we have access to the data and those stipulations. So a contribution agreement would happen after, without it having to go to the
Okay.
board, if they successfully
I'll make sure.
raise enough money.
Great, thank you.
Sal, last comment, please.
Yeah, could we have staff read the motion that we're going to vote on, please?
Angela?
Can I just ensure that, we've got a motion on the floor right now that the SLRD have access to the information provided, which was the second amendment. I don't believe that's been carried as of yet.
Oh, correct. No, it did. I didn't open comments on it because I wasn't interested in comments.
Okay.
Because I think we're pretty clear on where we're going.
And I think
And I think
Director
we're
Brand-
complicating things by adding a million comments that repeat what we've already said.
I think Director Rainbow seconded.
That's subject,
did.
that's subject to entering into a financial contribution agreement between the Mountain Valley Institute and the SLRD, including a provision that $20,000 in seed funding be for the completion of a feasibility study at an intermediate to advanced analysis level. Including the requirement for MVI to provide us with information on status of funding, with funding sources as follows: 5,000 from Area A PILT, 5,000 from Area B PILT, and 10,000 from Area D PILT. Is this a question?
No, there's a comment that
You can speak to the motion, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, so I guess I'm quite torn. I really like the direction. I don't like the idea of making what could be simple difficult. But with tilt funds, normally area directors know the people in the community well, and there's some validation, verification, understanding that way. Here, I had some conversations, but I don't know there's been any due diligence on the organization, on the group. It's a significant amount of money relative to what we spend, and so I would prefer maybe just taking a month, which to me doesn't seem like a long time, just to make sure this is a reasonable use of that money. I just have some discomfort with it. It's just a presentation, like it's been said, so.
Sal, go ahead. Sal, you're muted.
So in the contribution agreement, it'll be stated in there that they won't receive the funds until they come back, that they've got other funds to be able to complete it.
I have added that on MVI or Mountain Valley Institute providing confirmation on funding sources prior to the release of SLRD funding and then all information being provided as well.
Okay,
Thank you. Any other comments on the amended motion? Okay, I will call the question. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Lori's opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Colin. Okay, we have one piece of late business, and that's correspondence for information. It's a letter from Jan Naylor in Pemberton regarding passenger rail. Motion to receive, please. Moved by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Stoner. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other late business that I'm not aware of? No. Motion to adjourn committee of the whole, please. Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Stoner. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.